Okay, so you can download jQuery from here, jquery.com/download, and the latest version is 3.11, which I've already downloaded and installed locally on my public directory, JS vendor, and there it is, jQuery 1.1 min. All right, and so let's create a directory where we can play around with the jQuery. Right, so let's open up. Let's create a directory. We'll say jQuery Wednesdays, and let's create a couple of pages here to just play around with jQuery. So let's create new, and let's create a hello world page. And for now, let's just create a couple of H1. This will be hello world. Okay, and maybe a paragraph here. Let's grab lorem ipsum. Let's grab some dummy content. And let's start the server. And let's navigate to this page now. Let's go to localhost 3000, and we'll do lectures, jQuery, and this is Wednesdays, and this is hello.html. So right now we have this very simple web page, and we're going to install the jQuery library so we can play around with it. All right, so we're going to bring here script, and it's in src. I think we're going to go up one. Let's go up another one. Let's go down to JavaScript, vendor, and then jQuery 3.11. There it is. Okay? All right. And let's create here a little application that goes along with that with this hello world page, right? We'll call it maybe hello.js. Right? We'll create a file right next to this. We'll say hello hello.js. Okay. And just to make sure that we are loading this hello world, so that if we load, there it is, hello world, right? So we are loading that file. Okay, let's declare everything in our IFI. All right. Okay. So let's do a couple of things with jQuery. So what jQuery does when we load this library right here, it declares one global variable called the jQuery variable, right? Just like Angular declares its own Angular object, right? This one as well declares a jQuery object, right? So we can print out console log jQuery, right? So if I bring this the console here, and we load the page, notice that it prints out a function, right? So this function is the jQuery function, right? This is a very powerful function, right? Depending on what you pass it, it behaves differently, right? It's very, very overloaded. That can be treated in many different ways. The most common way to use it is to be able to refer to different portions of the document, right? We call it selecting, being able to select elements from the document, right? Refer to things in the document, right? And we already know how to refer to things in the document, don't we? We know one way. How do we, for instance, if I want to be able to refer to this H1 over here, what technology have we seen already that allows us to do that? CSS, right? CSS already allows us to be able to refer to that H1 and then say something about it, right? That we want the color to be green. Yes? If we refresh, it's green. So CSS, actually, it's a very nice language that allows us to refer to any portion of the document, right? To be very selective, or be very broad, right? To be able to refer to a family of elements, right? Or a very specific element, right? Or based on a particular hierarchy, or based on a whole bunch of rules. Yes? Well, jQuery does the same thing. jQuery can use as a string here. It can use a CSS rule here to refer to elements in the document. For instance, you can say h1, right? And you can do, once you have it, you can then play around with it. You can maybe assign it to a local variable, right? You can have it assigned, and once you have that object, this object is now an empowered object, right? That it assigns a whole bunch of functionality to this object that you can easily manipulate it, right? You can remove it, right? So if I render this again, it doesn't remove it. Wait, what? Oh, I know. All right. So what happens here is that notice that the JavaScript is declared here. By the time the browser parses this script, there is no h1 yet, right? It hasn't gotten to the body yet. See that, right? So it looks for h1. I didn't find it, right? So it didn't do anything, right? We could fix that by moving this over, right, and moving it down here at the end of the body. Okay, so if I rerun this, okay, good. It removed the h1. Yes.
How come CSS can find h1 and not jQuery?
Because this style is parsed by the browser. The browser knows what to do with this. It means that it's going to apply these styles once the DOM exists, right? Once the DOM exists, the browsers will go back in the second time, refer to every single node, right, and will apply these rules.
So you're saying that the entire thing is first printed and then these styles are applied to it?
Yes, that's the way the browser interprets it. Okay. Oops. Yes.
So, will jQuery go back to a second time? For example, if you use the light, for a second time?
You can. Yes, you can do that. Sure. A very common technique is to have jQuery wait until the document gets loaded, right? So instead of go ahead and try to manipulate it right now, is to tell jQuery, hey, wait until the document is parsed, right? And once the browser gets a hold of it and renders it, then it'll notify you that the document is ready, the DOM is there, go ahead, right? You go at it, do whatever you need to do, right? So let's do that, right? So let's move this back up. Let's move it back up, and it doesn't work, right? Okay, it doesn't work. So as I mentioned earlier, this jQuery function over here is a very powerful function, all right? One common thing to do is to pass jQuery instead of these strings here, an actual function. Pass it a function, all right? If you pass it a function instead, the jQuery function, right, interprets this as a callback function, right, to be invoked at a later time once the DOM has been parsed, has been created, right? What it does is that it binds an event handler with the body and says, hey body, once you have been rendered, right, once the document has been completely loaded, notify me. All right, because I want to do a couple of things in there. All right, notify me. So now we could say var h1 jQuery, right, grab h1. Right, now that we have h1, we can say remove, right, and this should work. There it is. Yes.
Does that delay happen only when it's given an anonymous function, or is it any function?
Right, so exactly, good question. So this is a very common syntax to have the function right inside, anonymous inside of as an argument to the jQuery function. I find this syntax hard to read. Okay, so I prefer to just declare it elsewhere, give it a name, or give it an actual name, right, and then pass it as an argument, right, and this behaves the same way. Yes? I find this much easier to read, even though there's no need for it, right? It's a waste of a very nice method name, right? Because no one else is going to call it, only jQuery is going to call it. Right? Maybe if you want to reuse it, perhaps it's a good idea to have it. All right? Make sense? All right. Now, us computer scientists, we're lazy, right? It's a required. It's required to be a computer scientist to be lazy. Right? A good software engineer is a lazy software engineer. We don't want to type more than we need to. So we have an alias for the jQuery word. Okay, it's too many letters, 6 letters, and one of them is capital. So we have an alias for this. It's a $sign alias, right? And this works just the same, right? So $sign is a very common alias to use for jQuery. It's also used as an alias for many other different libraries. In JavaScript, $sign is a perfect good name for a function. All right, underscore, many other symbols are perfectly good names for functions. Right, so you'll see a lot of these functions out there. You know, like underscore uses the underscore symbol, right? And many of these popular languages, libraries use these otherwise weird names. Okay, everybody good? All right. All right. So before I remove it, maybe I could do H1. I can change the CSS. What do you think CSS does? Right? It manipulates the style. Right? CSS. So you can presumably modify certain properties of the style. For instance, I want to change the color. Right? I want to change it instead of green. I want it to be red. Right? Notice that it flashed green for a second, right? Because that's the browser interpreting it. Then it notifies JavaScript, jQuery, saying, "Hey, I'm done." And then jQuery comes along and then modifies it to be red. Yes. Other things that you could do is you can change the actual content inside of the H1. You can change the HTML content to say, instead of "Hello World," "Goodbye World." No, that's too sad. Hello again. Right, so notice that I modify the content to be, instead of "Hello World," "Hello again." So notice if I look at the content, right, the HTML actually says "hello again," right? Even though the content that came from the server, right, it did come as "Hello World," right? Once jQuery got a hold of it, it modified the DOM to say hello again. Yes? Everybody good? All right, let's see. Notice that all these two functions are being applied to the same elements, H1. See that? Right? So it's very common to, instead of using H1 over and over and over and over, right? It's very common to chain these methods together, right? Each one of these methods returns the original object again. See that? This CSS, the return, whatever it returns an instance of H1. That means that at the end of this, right? At the end of this, we could just say .html. See that? Right? So that I can chain them together one after another, right? So if I refresh, notice that it works again, right? Also, notice that a single line of code it would become way too long if you're trying to do lots and lots of these things together. So it's also a very common thing to do is to put them in separate lines. Well, H1 is too small, but you would put them in separate lines, right? Each transformation that you might want to do. Okay, everybody okay? All right. Right. So other things. Let's see. You can not only can you refer to elements that already exist, right? You can create elements, brand new elements, right? For instance, let's create an H2, right? So let's create an H2. To create an H2, you need to give it the fully qualified element tag, right? So if you say the pointy bracket H2, right, it interprets this string differently than the way it interprets this string over here. Okay, this string, okay, it's a CSS rule, right? It's referring to all H1s. Yes, whereas this one is not a CSS rule. See that? Right? It's got pointy brackets. That's not a valid CSS rule. Right? So the way it interprets this, it parses it out and says, It's not a CSS rule. It must be a tag, right? So we're creating a brand new tag of type h2, right? And you can put a fully section 1, 2, 3, right? And this can be full HTML, right? It could be a long HTML element, okay? And then now if we load it, notice that nothing happens, right? We created it. It's in RAM, right? It's in memory. It's in JavaScript memory, but we haven't yet added it to the documents, right? To add it to the document, we need to add it to something. What can we add it to? Well, we could add it to the body, for instance, right? We can add it to the body. So to add it to the body, we need the body. We need to get a hold of the body, right? So let's grab the body, right? So we can say body. Notice no tag, right? I'm not putting pointy brackets. That means I am referring to something that already exists in the element in the document. Yes. Now I have the body, and I can assign it to a variable, the body. Notice that the name that I'm using here has absolutely nothing to do with the local variables, right? Because it says h1. This doesn't have to be h1. There's no magic here. Okay, jQuery has very little magic, unlike Angular, right? Angular, a lot of things happen by magic. Yes, this is very, very raw, right? This is as close as you're gonna get getting your hands dirty, right? So we have the body. Once we have the body, we can say, hey body, I want to append the h2 tag that I just created, right? And it behaves as you would expect. You have a question? Thank you. We're going to append h2. So if we refresh, notice that indeed section 1, 2, 3 was added to the body, right? And the name, as it suggests, is that it appends it, right? It adds it to something that is already there, right? So it means add it to the bottom, to the end, right? Or we can add it to the top. We can create a paragraph P, right? Here's a paragraph P. We can add things to the paragraph. Let's see, how can we add things to the paragraph? Ooh, we just learned how to do that, append, right? So we could add something to the paragraph.append, and let's add maybe this paragraph, this long paragraph, and say, there it is. So we have the paragraph, we just built the paragraph, and we can then just, now that we have the paragraph, we can add it to the body, right? So here's the body, but let's add it, instead of adding it to the bottom, let's add it to the top, right? So there's functions to do that as well. You can instead of appending, you can prepend, right? Which means put it at the top, right? So we can put the paragraph there, right? And if we refresh, there it is. We have lorem ipsum above and below. Now just like h1 over here, this h1 would refer to all h1s, right? If we console. If we step through this, right, let's put a breakpoint over here. Let's put a source, and let's where is it? Let's put a breakpoint right here. If we refresh and you hover h1, right, notice that it's an array. Right? It's an array that has one element, right? Because only one h1 was found. Okay, but the interesting part is that it's an array, right? If there were more than one h1, they would all be listed here in this array. Okay. So the cool thing is that just like CSS, that you can apply a rule that applies to a whole class of elements, right? All H1s, right? All elements that have a particular class, right? Same thing with jQuery. You can refer to a family of elements, right, and apply behaviors to all of them all at once, right? So let's continue. Right, so if I had another h1 in my HTML, if I had another h1 here, and this is section A, right, and I refresh, notice, section Oh, hello again. Yes, of course. Why is it hello again? Well, because the JavaScript says grab h1, change the color to red, right? And then change the HTML to hello again. Meaning all h1s, right, are color red and hello again. So you're applying these behaviors to all of them. Obviously, you could be a little more specific, right? For instance, this h1, you can say that the class is A, right? So you can be a little more specific. You can say h1.a, right? And then that means that only the one that has that class is applying that little behavior. Make sense? So you can be as broad or as specific as you want, right? If it's you can apply it just with the rule, just with a if you have the class A, right? Maybe the class is red, right? And the class is red over here, right? There it is. So the red one gets applied with dot red. See that? Everybody good? Everybody okay? All right. Let me put this back. H1. Okay. That means that I could grab all the paragraphs after they have been added. I can say grab all the paragraphs and change their color, their background color, right, to yellow. Right, so all paragraphs, right, I make them yellow. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? All right. What about objects, right? Working with objects, right? Say you have a list of movies, right? And the movies might be Terminator, Titanic, Aliens. I'm sorry? No, that's not James Cameron. Avatar. I have a thing for James Cameron. So let's iterate over this array, right? And as we iterate over the array, let's add dynamically, right? Let's add line items in a UL, right? Like you would add it dynamically. So let's create the list, right? And the list might be implemented as a brand new UL. Yes? And as we iterate over the array, we can say for var movie m in movies, right? As I iterate, I'm going to create a brand new line item for every movie that I find. Yes? Okay? So let's see. It says var line item. Let's build a brand new line item, right? And right here, I can append to it. I can append movies sub m, right? And once I have the line item with the movie name in it, I can then append it to the UL. I can say list. Dot append the line item, right? And the very last thing is that we're going to add the line item. You can say list dot append to the body. Notice how many different ways of doing the same exact thing, right? Before we were adding from the parent, we're adding a child. See that? The parent body is adding a paragraph. See that? Or you can invert that. You can say, hey, child, add yourself to some parent. Okay? So jQuery gives you all this, syntactic sugar of doing things different ways, in different ways. So here you can say child, append yourself to a parent, or we could have said the body dot append list. Right? They would be equivalent. Right? jQuery allows you to do one way or another. Right? So it's got lots and lots of syntactic sugar things to allow you to do it in different ways. This one over here, notice that we did li, and then once we have the li, we are appending a text, right, element to that li. we could have instead done this. We could have done this here, li, and then plus, right, movies sub m, plus, and then closed the tag. See that? We could have done that too. Right? Both of them are valid ways of doing the same thing. This way is a little more error prone. Okay? When you're concatenating strings, right, that tends to be error prone. You don't know if when you want to close things, open quotes, different close quotes. This is more object oriented, right? This is a little more object oriented. The only string you're manipulating is this right here because you're telling it that I want that tag. Yes. Yep, it'll do that for you. So this creates this right here, creates a node, right? An object representation of a node, right? The tags are mostly for us humans, right? Those are how we, right, visually understand that this is a tag or not a tag or a CSS, right? Once it's creating into an object, right, it goes into the object world, right? It doesn't need the pointy brackets or the slash or whatever, right?
So this applies like all HTML tags?
Yes. Yep. All HTML tags. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Same thing here, right? When we look at elements and see that it uses these pointy brackets, right, and also uses indentation, and it creates this hierarchy for us. That's for us humans, right? That we like to look at things in boxes and hierarchy, and we can't deal with too much information, and we need to see things in a hierarchy to be able to manage complexity. So it's it's a browser being nice to us humans that have a very low bandwidth. Well, we have a pretty good input bandwidth. We have very slow output bandwidth with these meat sticks. We can't type very fast. All right, so now that we have the list, we are going to append the list to the body. Okay, there it is. Terminator, Titanic, Aliens, and Avatar. Right? See, they're added right there. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? All right. Let's keep going. Let's play around now with the other library. The other library is the Jquery Ui Library. So Jquery Ui Library, let me just show it to you. Actually, stop.